A young boy, devastated by the loss of his mother, couldn't imagine life without her. He wept at her grave, feeling a deep emptiness. But one day, as he sat there crying, he felt a soft hand rest on his shoulder. Startled, he turned around and saw a kind woman standing before him. Kevin was just 6 years old when his mother tragically passed away in an accident. Since then, he had been living in an orphanage, never knowing his father and with no other family willing to care for him. Life in the orphanage was difficult for him. He often daydreamed about being with his mother again, wishing she could come and take him away. The other children would mock him, cruelly reminding him that his mother was gone and he would never see her again. "Face the truth, Kevin," they would say. "Your mother is dead, and you'll never see her again. Stop crying." The teasing only made Kevin more miserable. He often cried alone, which led to even more mockery from the other children, who called him a crybaby. "No one will want to adopt someone like you," they taunted. One day, the children were allowed to go for a walk in the park. But instead of joining them, Kevin ran away. He headed straight for the city cemetery, the place where he knew his mother was buried. He had promised himself that he would visit her often, but the orphanage barely allowed him to leave. When Kevin reached the grave, he sat beside it, his heart aching with sorrow. "I miss you so much, Mom," he sobbed. "Please, take me with you. There's nothing for me here." As he cried, he suddenly felt a warm hand on his shoulder. He wiped his eyes and turned around, finding a woman standing there. She was bathed in sunlight, her presence seeming almost ethereal. "Are you all right, sweet boy?" she asked gently. Kevin looked up at her with tear-filled eyes. "I don't have a mother anymore." "I miss her so much," he said, his voice heavy with sadness. "I'm so sorry to hear that," the woman replied with compassion. "Where do you live now?" "In the orphanage," Kevin answered quietly. The woman introduced herself as Susan and sat down beside him. "I visit the cemetery to see my son's grave," she explained. Kevin's eyes widened in surprise when he heard her name. "That's my mother's name too," he exclaimed excitedly. Susan smiled warmly and, sensing the boy's loneliness, offered to take him back to the orphanage. On their way, they passed a small amusement park. Susan asked if he wanted to stop and have some fun. Kevin eagerly nodded, and they spent the afternoon riding the carousel and enjoying ice cream together. When they returned to the orphanage, Susan said her goodbyes, leaving Kevin with a comforting thought. "Your mom loves you, sweetheart. Never doubt that." That night, Susan couldn't shake the feeling that something was meant to happen. She prayed at church, hoping that Kevin would find a loving family. Later that night, she had a strange dream. In it, her late son Adam handed her a note with an address written on it. "Mom, please take me with you," he told her. The dream repeated several times over the next few days, and Susan shared her feelings with her husband. "I've been having these dreams about Adam," she told him. "In each dream, he gives me an address and tells me to take him with me. It's so strange." Richard, her husband, listened carefully. "What could it mean? Have you figured it out?" "I don't know," Susan replied, "but I've had this dream ever since I met a boy named Kevin at the cemetery. He was visiting his mother's grave, and he said he lived at the orphanage. I took him back there." After some thought, Richard and Susan decided to investigate the address from her dreams. To their surprise, the address led them straight to the orphanage where Kevin lived. When they arrived, Susan noticed Kevin sitting by a window on the ground floor. She pointed him out to Richard. "Look, that's Kevin, the boy I met at the cemetery," she said. "Kevin, what are you doing there?" Susan called out to him. "I'm praying that my mom will come and take me away from here," Kevin said, looking up at the sky with a hopeful expression. At that moment, Susan and Richard exchanged a knowing look. They had come to a decision. They wanted to adopt Kevin and give him the loving home he deserved. Kevin was overwhelmed with emotion when he learned that Susan and Richard wanted to adopt him. It was a dream come true. God answered my prayers, he said as he shared a meal with them one evening. My mom took me away from the orphanage, and now I'm here with my family. Susan smiled, her heart full. God answered my prayers too, sweetheart. When I met you, I prayed that you would find a loving family. I didn't know back then, but I'm so glad that we became your family. Thank you for giving us a chance, Kevin.